Video 6.1 of the Research Methods course, RS-503. We're going to begin looking at another textbook, Adler and Van Doren, How to Read a Book. So this is the first part of Adler and Van Doren, How to Read a Book. So here it is. This is really an American classic. First came out in 1940. And the latest edition that you have is the early 70s. And as I actually read this book twice now. Once in my early days of seminary, and then more recently just because I wanted to. And there are many things in this book that I think anticipate sound biblical hermeneutics. I first learned how to study, interpret the Bible in when I started seminary in the late 80s, and I began to read hermeneutics books. But then as I read Adler and Van Doren, first written in 1940, he was saying many of the things that later hermeneutical writers were applying to the Bible. So this is a really great book to learn from, not only just to know how to read, but really how to study a text, and in particular the Bible. So I'm summarizing Adler Van Doren into four sections, and there are four levels of reading that he talks about. We're going to spend most of our time on level 4, but I want to touch on the first 3. Level 1 is what he calls elementary reading. Basically, that answers the question, what does the sentence say? And we are, all past that level. This would be a person, basically, a young person learning to read. Another level is what he calls syntopical reading, or comparative reading. The reader reads many books and places them in relation to one another and to a subject about which they revolve. And so this would be if you're studying a book of the Bible and you surround yourself with commentaries, Bible dictionary, a Bible encyclopedia, maybe a Bible atlas, some study Bibles, many books around the book of the Bible that you are studying. The third level is what he calls inspectional reading. We want to spend a little time here because I believe it is valuable. What is inspectional reading? The aim is to get the most out of a book within a given time. It is the art of skimming systematically. The art of skimming systematically. The aim is to examine the surface of a book to learn everything that the surface alone can teach you. Typical questions that you would ask during inspectional reading would be, what is the book about? What is the structure of the book? What are the parts of the book? There are a couple of sub-levels of inspectional reading. The first one is skimming, or what he calls pre-reading. This step discovers whether a book requires more careful reading. Books are on different levels. And sometimes books require careful reading, sometimes books not so much. The inspectional reading process helps you find that out. Step 1 of skimming: read the title page and preface quickly, noticing any indications of the aim of the book. So I used to, when I was younger, I used to, open a book and I'd skip all of the preliminaries. I'd go right to chapter 1 and get going. But as I gotten older, I've begun to employ these sort of things. I look things over before I start the book. I read the preface. I read the foreword. It kind of helps give you a feel for what you're getting into. Study the table of contents to get a general sense of the structure. And so really a good table of contents is the author's outline and just in a different form. So this will give you a good idea of where the book is going. Step 3, check the index to discover the range of topics and the kinds of books and authors that are referred to. So it's good to look in the back of the book. If there is a subject, author index, subject index, even depending on the book, a scripture index. This gives you a good, again, a good feel for, where the author has gone himself in his research in preparing to write this book. Read the publisher's blurb. This might summarize the main points of a book. So on a hard copy book, the cover, the inside cover, or maybe the back cover will give you a little bit about what the book is about. And sometimes the author himself will write the publisher's blurb. So you really get maybe the author's insight into what his own book is about. Step 5, look at the chapters that seem pivotal. If they have opening and or closing summary statements, read carefully. So if you can tell from the table of contents which chapters are more important, perhaps, or maybe there's a kind of a chapter in the center or toward the end that seems to be climactic, then maybe read the first part of that chapter or the last part of that chapter. That helps you, again, get a feel for the book. Turn the pages, step 6. Read an occasional paragraph, looking for the main points. Especially read the last 2 or 3 pages. So you're skimming, and I would say at this point, you're also looking, you're reading an occasional paragraph, but maybe if the chapters have headings and subheadings, be sure and examine those, because that's kind of part of the author's outline. The whole process should take no more than a few minutes, at most an hour. The second sublevel of inspectional reading he calls superficial reading. Remember, level 1 is skimming or pre-reading. Section 2, superficial reading. When tackling a difficult book for the first time, read it through without ever stopping to look up or ponder the things you do not understand right away. So Adler and Van Doren are fans of just plowing into a book and not slowing down until you've read the whole thing. You will have a much better chance of understanding it on a second reading, but that requires you to have read the book through at least once. So if this is an important book you have, if it's a book worth reading, a book worth digesting, then they maintain that it's a good idea to read the book, don't stop and even think about it, come back and read it again. You'll have a better chance of understanding it that way. So in summary of inspectional reading, every book should be read no more slowly than it deserves and no more quickly than you can read it with satisfaction and comprehension. Skimming or pre-reading a book is always a good idea. It is generally desirable to skim even a book that you intend to read carefully to get some idea of its form and structure. So even if you know you're going to read it carefully, Even if you know it's a book that you're going to have to really slow down and get through and think about and that kind of thing, it's still a good idea to pre-read. Do not try to understand every word or page of a difficult book the first time through. Race through even the hardest book. You will then be prepared to read it well the second time. That is the end of this video.